Welcome everyone to today's session, Breaking Down the Barriers with Accounts Payable Automation. My name is Henry Imes and I'll be the moderator and one of the presenters on today's call. We're very excited to have a couple of guest faculty on today's session, but before we get started, let's take care of some housekeeping items. Because there's so many of you on the call today, we have your phones in a listen-only mode. However, we do want to hear from you. To let us know that you can hear my voice, see the slides, and are ready to begin, please locate the question tab in the control panel and type in the word GO. Wonderful. I see them coming in. Thanks, Tom. Thanks, George. Thanks, Sarah, for, I see so many coming in. Excellent. The control panel question tab is how you ask questions to us during the session. So before we get started, let's take a look at today's faculty. My name is Henry Imes, and I'm the Managing Director of Paystream Advisors. Today we have two guest faculty, Fabrice Bruron from Prodagio Software and Pete Stevens from Prodagio Software, two experts in the area with more than combined 30 years experience in accounts payable automation. We're going to be leveraging their experiences throughout today's call to give us some insights into things that they're seeing in the marketplace which are helping organizations reduce the barriers to AP automation. Here's the reality. We know many of you have wanted to automate accounts payable for some time, but just haven't gotten there. There's been things holding you back. Today we're going to be talking about the trends that we've seen in the past based on some survey data and feedback that we have from our benchmarking studies. And we're going to be looking at where the future is and what tomorrow looks like. We're also going to delve into what does end-to-end AP automation look like. Fabrice is going to give us a sense of how this works with Prodagio software. We're going to talk about advanced capture, commonly called OCR, and we're going to try and help you understand the differences between those. And at the end here, we're going to give you some sense of how to crush those barriers and the best practices for invoice processing. So welcome. There's going to be more, as we mentioned here. We're going to do some poll questions. We're going to have participation, and we already have started answering your questions. A couple of folks have said, do we get the slides? Yes, you will. In fact, we also are recording this session for archive. So for those of you who are joining us in the archive, welcome. You're going to benefit from the questions and the insights that we shared with our audience on today's call. Paystream Advisors, for those who are not familiar, is a research and consulting firm. We've been around for 13.5 years, and in that time we've been studying financial operations in a whole host of areas that you can see here. Paystream has recently added our budgeting and forecasting. We have a conference each year called the Paystream Purchase to Pay Summit. This year's event will be in September in San Antonio, Texas. And we have a training academy to teach managers how to transform accounts payable and purchasing into a purchase-to-pay operation. You can learn more about that at paystreamadvisors.com. The core elements of what we're going to talk about today really lift from our research reports and end-user surveys, which we're going to share with you in just a moment. So with that, I'd like to bring up our first poll question. We want to hear from you. So let me get that ready for you, and you can participate in today's call. What's the biggest challenge that you face in AP today? What's the biggest challenge you face? So Fabrice, in your years of experience of doing this, you've come across, well, literally, probably dozens and dozens of companies that are trying to automate accounts payable. What would you say are the biggest challenges that we're going to see in 2014? What's our audience going to tell us?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question, Henry. Good morning, everyone. Well, I think even though we're in 2014, a lot of the customers we talk to are still receiving invoices by email, 60 to 80% actually. It's a huge volume. And when you take that huge volume and the fact that actually 2/3 of the suppliers they do business with submit 1 or 2 invoices a year, that's a big struggle. It's still a struggle. So we're going to talk about how you take down that barriers actually to automation, but that's a big problem in receiving invoice.
Wow. Well, look at our results here. Overwhelming here are saying, by the way, they could vote for more than one. 56 at TI here saying majority invoices received in paper format, the manual data entry, followed on by exception invoices. I'm glad we heard that. And so the reason we're asking you this question is because we're going to tailor some of our session based on what you tell us. And we're going to drill in on how these technologies in an end-to-end process can help close that gap or break through the barrier. Thank you, Fabrice. Excellent. So Paystream has been studying this market, as I said, for a number of years. And from our most recent survey in Q3 of 2013, over 300 of you responded. We took away some key insights, and these details are going to be just releasing in a report that we've just completed called Electronic Invoicing. You can see it on the newsstands now. AP professionals are exploring a whole host of ways to reduce processing costs, gain visibility, increase on-time payments, and what some of you have said, yes, reducing exceptions and discrepancies. So what's wrong with AP? Well, the survey data tells us that from 2012 to 2013, there's been some shifts, although not significantly, except in this area around discrepancies and exceptions. Look at that. We have a 7% difference. And although our margin of error on this survey is plus or minus 5%, that's significant. When we see a 7% difference, we know that is significantly different. But most people are still complaining about paper. Most are complaining about manual data entry. We know that that's not the way business is done today in 2014. We want to get away from the manual routing. And, well, how can we do it? How do we break through the barriers that are holding us back from doing it? It's obvious. We know what you want to do. So how do you highlight this in 3 big opportunities? The first piece there is I want to focus on getting the data. This is kind of, well, using that old term from Ford, getting data is job 1. Good data is step 1 to a flat process. That means that in order to make our overall straight-through process work, invoices come in. Of course, we would love to have it come in electronically. The reality is most of us are not Walmart, and most of us are not, well, yeah, that very big company, IBM, who's one of the sponsors on today's session. We don't have the same kind of empowerment over our suppliers. So we can ask them, please give us your electronic invoices. But reality is most of our suppliers are still going to provide us paper or email. So how do we get that data, and what do we do with it? We're going to talk about that, and Pete and Fabrice are going to help us think through that. The next piece here is, well, workflow and bicycles. What does that mean? Well, routing an invoice to the person whose name is on the invoice is really quite easy. It says Pete Stevens on it. I'm going to route it to Pete. Let him deal with it. What? Well, the business logic of how I route or when I route is not easy. Here's a quick example. If an invoice has Pete Stevens' name on it, but it also has a PO on it, do I even need it to route it to Pete? Here's the problem. Your inbox and everyone else at your organization's inboxes of email are ever more crowded. Some of it's very strategic important. Some of it's not. Very difficult for the folks who are sending emails to differentiate. So we're seeing a slower response to email-based notification approvals because they get lost in the inboxes. Frankly, of course, it happens to all of us. Oh, you sent me that? Oh, let me go find it. Can you send it again? Determining and deciding how you just define this business logic in your company is something unlike getting on a bike and doing it. It's not so easy, and it's going to change over time as you get better at managing how you want this process to do. Overall, though, what we learned from the innovators, and that's the people that we put in the top quartile of our response base, the ones who have the lowest cost per invoice, the highest percentage of straight-through invoices, the lowest percentage of exceptions. What we find for this group is that their foundations are, well, built on a very well-developed design. And tech and automation are certainly critically important, But the design and the structure is the rest of the story. People and process, in other words, you and your team of how you manage this is really the rest. Now, we're going to learn a little bit more here about the invoice opportunity inside the invoices themselves. Today, we're only capturing about 5% of the invoice data that's on the invoice. The critical information, the 5 or 6 or 7 header information fields, dollar amount, due date, vendor, tax, etc. Maybe some of you are capturing freight or other things at the header level. We also have a challenge with that, though, because maybe we make some errors in the keying process. We know it's, of course, keying and slow. You've all told us that's slowing you down. In our work, we know that the average AP department spends about 40% of its time doing manual data entry. And there's all kinds of challenges within that. Duplications, fat fingering or miskeying, or, well, messing things up with our suppliers by not paying them on time because invoices are delayed, maybe around holiday time or Christmas or vacation time where we can't get to all the invoices. We're going to drill into that and say, all right, well, that data, beyond the data that's just in the header, what else is there and what can we do with it? When we look at the broad AP automation trends, and this is where we get really excited, this is a fast-shifting up market. Lots of activity in this marketplace, and we're seeing more and more people, organizations of all sizes, going into this automation area. And it's no longer just about the software. It's about payments. It's about paperless processing. And it's about OCR, or what we call intelligent document recognition, moving to the cloud in some instances. That means you don't have to own a lot of the software and spend a lot of money up front to get what you need. Now, 31% of you talked about exception invoices, which means you could unable to process invoices because it was missing information. That is a red-hot area of our market today, where we can make it truly touchless in accounts payable and get it right to our approver, recommender, reviewer, without having to be stopping in the AP process, which, if we're not adding value, why do we want to look at it? And if we could only look at those invoices that need special attention, what value would that bring? We think that 2014, as we look ahead, is going to be the year that paperless invoice really dominates. And while we see email-based invoice showing a lot of great opportunity for conversion to electronics, we still see that, well, some suppliers do want to participate and submit invoices electronically. That's great. But we need to have both. We need to have all three. We need to have a funnel that allows suppliers to fax them in, email them in, electronically upload them, send us EDI files. We got to make it as easy as possible to reduce the reasons for our suppliers to say no, they don't want to do it. The good news is that we've seen a tremendous trend toward this increased automation, and drilling into that, using the data on the invoices, whether it came in electronically or paper, to make better decisions so our AP staff can now be not just a data entry and a process review function, but one that can add value to an organization, perhaps capturing additional discounts or improving our return on investment because we're providing insights about what we bought faster to our suppliers or to our buyers, procurement staff, supply chain folks. All good things. In other words, we're making the case here that the invoices today, we're not putting all the data that we have of those invoices in our system, but there's a lot more in them that can be of value to our organization. Our ERP can only handle so much data, but our AP system can handle, well, the big data that you've heard about. Here's the great news, is that we're seeing more and more companies of all sizes participating. In this question, we asked, what solutions have you adopted to automate AP in our 2012 or 13 survey? Well, front-end imaging is being used by the largest organizations nearly 80% of the time. Those are companies that are greater than $2.5 billion in revenues. The medium-sized companies, those with $500 million to $2.5 billion in revenues, well, you can see they're coming fast up the curve. This has been growing a lot. But there's some surprises here. OCR optical character recognition, now what we call intelligent data recognition or intelligent data capture, is grown from what used to be 6% about 8 years ago to, look at these numbers, 40% of organizations that are large are using this today. It used to be everybody thought, oh, we're going to get it electronically. Well, we can get majority electronically, but what about the paper? What about the rest? What are we going to do with that? Automated workflow is rapidly moving into the mainstream, and we consider mainstream adoption anywhere over 40%. This mid-market group of companies in that 500 to 2.5 billion range, they're right there. They're right on the doorstep, and that's why we said 2014 is going to be a watershed year. Those organizations today are the rapid adopters, and you can see what this means for the rest of the tools. Electronic payments, widely used pretty much across all industries, the most common tools that you guys are using, purchasing cards falling in right in there. And electronic invoicing, you can see how, well, it's muted because a lot of organizations necessarily didn't see the immediate value because they felt that they weren't big enough or sophisticated enough to get their suppliers to do what they want. We're going to bring it up to our next poll question, and Pete's going to help us think through this question. Where are you in your plan for AP automation? So Pete, now you've been doing this for a long time. What do you think our audience is going to tell us, and what do you know from your work at Prodagio?
Well, you know, I throw out two recommendations really quickly of, as you're in the planning process, things to think about. The first is really set your baseline data, and there's two areas where you're going to get value from. One is in the overall process improvement, but don't underestimate what you can do in terms of improving discount management. If you can get a couple basis points on your total spend, you can turn your AP department into a profit center. And the other guidance, and this comes from our own customers and their best practice experiences, I embrace purchasing in the process. You know, part of straight-through processing is having good data in your ERP and good data in your purchasing system, and bringing purchasing into the process can really make your whole implementation and your goals on straight-through processing to be much, much better.
Excellent. We talked about good data. We talked about profit center. Boy, that's exciting words for accounts payable that used to think of ourselves as, well, a cost center, not a profit center. That's a great concept. But let's close the polls and share those results. 50% of you said you're researching, plus the 6% who are planning. That's great. You're in the right place, and we're really glad that you came because we want to help you get over the barriers. We know you've had a plan. 28% of you are working on actually implementing this right now. Hopefully we're going to be able to give you some really good tips and pointers here to think about. And, well, there's a replacement market here, Pete, that some of us are telling us, 11% saying replace an existing solution, and 6% saying, well, we're not currently planning. And I'm sure they wish they were, but their organization perhaps just not ready. So let's take a look at some more of these surveys results. We asked about, have you adopted workflow? And we can give you an overall sense of what's happening with approval workflow. And we include in there matching. In the question, we said, do you use a tool to manage the routing of invoices and or match those invoices against purchase orders? 37% are using the solution. And the good news here is that we've seen a significant uptick here, up 3% from the combined piece here from 2012. Lots of people deploying this, and a lot here are considering it. So we know you're not alone in what you're working on. And now let's also ask here about the case for capture. With the benefits of a front-end data capture and centralized invoice processing clearly established as a best practice, and I'm going to highlight that at the end, we know that the progressive companies are also moving to convert static invoices into dynamic data. In other words, making the data that's in those invoices valuable to the organization. We know today's ERP doesn't track all the data that we have there, but there's more on those invoices than just the header information. An example would be if you're a manufacturer and you have plants and you have a contract to buy your oxygen from one company. Well, what if the supplier management folks, either in supply chain for a safety reason, want to find every invoice that has oxygen on it and find out Are we buying oxygen from another company like Air Liquide when we have all of our oxygen purchases from Airgas? So we can search in today's world using the intelligent document recognition all of the documents to find the word oxygen and show every invoice that has the word oxygen on it. That's pretty powerful. You can see how you can use that big data to make additional spend decisions. Perhaps it's for a material safety data sheet issue. What if Freedom Industries, those guys up in West Virginia that had a little spill last week, what if they could find out every product that they had that included that chemical in it for the regulators who are obviously in there making their lives a little bit miserable this week? So you can see that the majority of you say, yeah, we got a lot of paper and manual data is our error, our challenge. However, there's much more to it. It's also around improving the visibility to invoices and reducing things like discrepancies. What data do we have in those invoices to give us a higher straight-through rate in our AP operation? Here's the great news. When we think about electronic invoicing, 82% of companies have either adopted or are evaluating e-invoice technology. This is up significantly, well, 12% from 2012. And they're working on it, and that means good things. So should you be working on that too? Absolutely. In order to make that work, though, you've got to have a very strong foundation. The foundation was design and an AP automation solution that could manage those inbound invoices. What are you going to do with them when they come in? How are you going to route them around? And the next piece here was about exceptions. We know a bunch of you said exceptions were a real challenge for you. So what do we do with reducing the exception rate, and how does AP automation fit into that? What we find is that the innovators are using workflow, matching, routing, and the data that comes in on invoices to improve the process so that they can count out on the number of invoices that have the wrong PO number. Here's an example. Invoice comes in, PO number is listed. Let's say it was emailed in. Systems like Prodagio can say that that PO number is incorrect and can be routed back to the supplier immediately via email without anybody in AP having to, well, lift a finger and reach out and say to the supplier, hey, we can't process this invoice. That PO number is missing. And here's the best part. When we do that, we're assuring that the supplier is going to fix it before moving forward with sending us another invoice with that error. And that really leads us to straight-through processing. When we asked organizations about their goals for 2014, 87% had said they have a goal, and 43% wanted it to be invoices to be majority electronic in 2014. That's really good. So what does that mean for us in our straight-through processing? The more we bring in the electronic data, the more we can use that data to have a straight-through processing in our accounts payable group. I gave you one example. There's many more. What if an invoice is out of funds, or a PO number is out of funds? Again, we can route the invoice to the PO owner and say, hey, we have invoices coming in against this PO, but it's out of funds. Do you want to reject these invoices, or do you need to, which of course 99% of the time, increase the value of the PO? It's usually not the supplier's error. Of course, we all know that. Which brings us to our next poll question. What are the barriers you are facing in automating your accounts payable? Is it management focus? So Fabrice, what are you seeing at Prodagio?
Well, we see a lot of things. The main thing that that the CIO or the IT manager are facing is still a lot of pressure on doing more with less. So less resources, less infrastructure, and I think the industry is at the right timing right now in 2014 to really adopt and embrace cloud technology, which is one of the big barriers sometimes to projects is the availability and the cost. So that's one thing we're going to pay attention this year, and definitely we want to talk about how we tackle with this barrier.
Yeah, fascinating, right. So we used to hear, getting IT resources was the big barrier, and now it seems with SaaS and software as a service, it is shifting. That used to be the number one. We see it shifting in that more are saying, okay, the IT manager is willing to do more because they know that they can get the software as a service platforms, and sometimes that's the right answer for an organization. But many times now they're saying, how do I get a return on investment? How do I convince management it's time to do this and move forward? So let's share the results here. 67% of you said management is the issue, and that's the biggest barrier that we have. How do we get management on board? 33% lack of budget, 40% of you, no surprise, said getting IT resources. And 13% said, yeah, we don't have a good business case to do it. Well, hopefully some of what we can share with you will help you think through that. And at this point, it's exciting to turn over the session to Fabrice to give us some sense of what's happening and tell us about his company, Prodagio, and how Prodagio is driving value in this in this AP automation world, and specifically, how are they helping organizations overcome the barriers? So, Fabrice, tell us about Prodagio.
Yeah, sure. Well, thank you, Henry, very much about this insightful survey about the trends in 2014. So what we're going to do in the next few minutes is discuss about how we approach those barriers. And I've got here also with me Pete Stevens, who's going to give you a live demonstration of Prodagio AP, because we think that a picture is worth 1,000 words. So before we get started, a few words about Prodagio software. We've done AP automation for quite some time, since 1997. And as an IBM partner, we're very excited about the solution that we're providing, as our approach is to provide you all you need to do effective AP automation. And for that, we leverage several components, obviously Prodagio AP, but also very powerful components from the IBM suite of products for the capture data cap, but also the FileNet repository. And this work has been unnoticed, I would say, since we've worked closely with various analysts, including Paystream and other ones. In the 17 years that we've done AP automation, we've worked with quite interesting organizations, from small to international, and implemented over 50 countries. We work also from simple requirements, simple needs, from capture workflow to very complex needs around transforming the organization into shared services and being able to work, across multiple systems. So that experience, we've acquired over the 17 years of work, really drove us to approach the AP automation very differently. And what we learned is that all those best practice is, why not make them available as best practice configuration into the system and help our customers with a head start and standardize not only process, but also connection to ERP system, templates to be able to work more effectively and add value to the organization. And that's what we're going to go through. What it means is that our approach is how we can minimize the implementation in days, and that's, we think, is very unique. How we can give the tools to our customer to adapt, because they need to do things on their own in terms of changing and adapting the process. But most than anything, and that was one of the poll results, how you get a real payback on this kind of project. So this said, I'm going to turn it over to Pete to walk you through about what looks like the solution and how it can help to break down those barriers.
Yeah, thanks Fabrice and thanks Henry. I'm going to go really quickly through a couple slides just to give a couple of concepts, and these are applicable for any AP offering, but really help kind of ground the overall perspective on both what the technologies are possible of, but also what business value can be derived from it. And so when you consider any AP system, you really need to pay attention to everything it connects to. And at first, there's all these different multiple ways invoices can come in. You want to make sure that the system and the approach allows a portfolio approach, because not one system or not one invoice method fits all suppliers. And we always have to deal with our long-tail suppliers and our smaller suppliers that don't have the sophistication that our larger suppliers. So you want to make sure, again, that the system provides value to all those. Also, very important is that everything you do is going to be connected into your ERP. We're completely complementary with your ERP. We add value. What we do really well and what AP systems do really well is help you manage that business process. What ERPs do really well is capture all that data and make sure it's all in the right place for reporting after the fact. So when we remove those barriers, as I go through the demonstration, I really want you to focus on 4 key themes. The first is I'm going to walk you through a scan demonstration and really show you how easy it is to go through this process of capturing the data via email or scan, or maybe it's an uploaded locally, a photograph and an image, where we do the data capture and how much OCR has advanced. You'll get a feeling for that. But the second important thing is you want to simplify the processing. If I made the data easy to grab now, that doesn't mean everything's going to straight through. Everything's going to go straight through processing. You're still going to have business issues you need to solve. Example, my price has changed for one of the goods on my PO. This happens all the time. That's not a data error issue. That's not something AP can solve. I need to get that to purchasing right away. And they need to deal with the fact of, well, no, we're going to accept this price, or I'm going to go back to the vendor and choose a different price. So this managing real exceptions process needs to be really, really efficient. And we'll show you how you can simplify that through a very effective workflow. Then last, using data. You know, everybody talks about big data, but how can I use big data to help me really get the value and really show a return on this? We'll get you some good points on how to use the information to better discounts, manage discounts, as I had mentioned, but also eliminate bottlenecks and improve the system as you go forward. And the last thing that really, SaaS has brought to us is you really need to start with a pre-existing set, some best practices, so you're not reinventing the wheel and redesigning a process that others have already perfected. And we'll give you some indications of how you might want to be able to do that as you go through. So I'm the product guy, so I can't help having a little block diagram of explaining a technical concepts, but I'm not going to step through each one of these blocks, but I just wanted to give you a feeling for how OCR really has changed. And the great technology that IBM provides to our solution, which is DataCap, what it allows us to do is go through this whole process of taking this image, and it uses its technology and its best practices to turn that image into something that can then be OCR'd. And then OCR is basically, I'm going to take those dots on the paper and I'm going to turn them into the data. Now here's the really cool part. This is where I get into intelligent document recognition, and this is really one of the wonders of this technology. So not only can it recognize a 425 and the word INV number, but it also knows that INV number means invoice number. And if another supplier puts something in, it's going to know when it says invoice NO dot that that's going to be invoice number also. So all this knowledge about what a document and an invoice looks like is built right into the technology. And so what you'll see as I step through this is I'm only dealing with the exceptions again. I'm only dealing with the things that can't 100% figure out. And we'll show you how easy that is to step through. And so we'll do the quick invoice capture, and then I'll walk you through a validation and an approval, and we'll show you some analytics right after that. So I'm going to flip right over into the DataCap technology. And as I said, those steps have already occurred where it's done the scan processing and done the OCR, and I put a batch of 30 through for this demonstration, and you can see it only has 7 exceptions. And here's how easy the interface is to understand. It's found one it's shown in yellow here down at the bottom, where it doesn't feel highly confident, not 100% confident, that it's matched what's on the image. And I don't have to actually jump over and try to find where it's trying to scan and look for that information over here on the big invoice. It's just put that little piece of the image right here above in this image snippet, So I can quickly do a visual guide here and see, look at that one, that's right, that's not too bad. And you can see over here now it's highlighted the unit price for me. So if I just tab through that, I've validated that exception invoice. It's easy as that. Now the other thing that's really important in a process is that I'm using data to help me, not just what's on the invoice, but data outside and business logic outside. So here, it's catching the fact that last year there was not a 229 for February. It was actually 228, and I can't go forward unless that information is right. So not only is it doing OCR, but it's doing data validation on the actual fields. The other thing I can do is I can look up directly into my ERP system, and all that data that I need to help me figure out an invoice is available. So now I threw in an invoice that's never seen before, JWS. IBM's DataCap technology has a technology called fingerprints. And what this is going to do, and this is how the other 13 made it through, the other 23 made it through the 30, because it used the fingerprints to identify those. I'm going to build a fingerprint and show you how easy it is to train the system on an invoice. So we're quickly going to do this. JWS is my vendor, so I just go over to my image and grab JWS. I'm going to look up into the ERP to find the right vendor zip, that's my remit to zip, and find the vendor ID. The vendor ID doesn't exist anywhere on this invoice. Now I have that critical piece of information. And I just step through in this rubber banding of finding the piece of data. Here's invoice, here's tax, I found tax. Here's the PO number. I'm going to jump over and click on the PO number. Each time it's putting that little snippet above. There's no shipping going on, and I've just coded the header. Completely finished. Now let's do a line item real fast. So I'm going to go ahead and add the first line item, choose my number, go to quantity, come down here to item description. Again, it's tracking all that information as I go through. I go to price and line item total. And now I've trained it one line item. Now it would really be a drag if I had to go through and do these other two. We don't have time in this demo. Let's say there was 100. That would be a lot of work. There's a great feature in here that uses that mapping I already did to allow me to find every single line item there is. So now let me just step through those, and you can see it found the next line item, so this KCL and the fresh water that was ordered. As I step into the next invoice, that fingerprint is now put in memory. And so any invoice that it finds that has this, now the reason it doesn't immediately apply it because I'm in an active session, if next time a JWS comes through, it's going to go straight through. But now I can take that fingerprint and apply it to this second JWS invoice that came in by clicking this sticky available button. And now I've matched this invoice completely. And so that shows you how quickly, by using both the power of OCR and fingerprints, the data that exists in my ERP system, and some of the business logic that's inherent in the technology, to quickly validate these invoices. So if they're sent through email, if they're sent in physically, I can quickly scan through those. So that's the first thing in terms of removing paper. Very, very easy for us to do. Let's go on into talk about simplifying the process. So now I'm going to jump into the Prodagio application. And I'm confronted now with a screen, and I'm logged in as a processor, and I'm going to process an invoice here in just a second. But let me point out a couple of things. You can see that all my invoices that have come through, I've already started working on some of these in various states. This one I sent an email back to the supplier to get a question answered. This one has been escalated from some of my team members. So this dashboard really helps me quickly understand everything that's going on with that invoice. I'm going to go ahead and grab a couple more. We're a queue-based system, and so you can set up multiple work groups and have a lot of flexibility in that configuration. So not only do you get the benefit of these best practices, but you can use and make minor modifications to your own system to make it even more fluid. And I'm providing, again, quick things to help me, guide me through the process. I actually have a picture of the invoice over here that I can zoom in on. I can grab that invoice, and I still haven't had to go to an edit screen, so flattening everything out. But let's quickly go through a process of validating an invoice. Here's that JWS, and that JWS that I pushed through has a business issue on it, and that business issue is the fact that it couldn't find that PO number properly. And so I'm going to go ahead and find that PO number. Again, I'm going in to the ERP. I'm always connected with the ERP, always trading information back and forth. But I have visibility immediately as an AP team. As soon as that thing comes in the scan, I can see and report on it. Let's go ahead and save and fix that issue. And now here's a great and an important thing in processing invoices. And this is where Prodagio has a unique approach to this. We use what's called a dynamic rules engine. And that's kind of a lot of technical words about basically what it's doing. It's constantly making sure that I'm passing the rules that I've set up in the system. And if ever it changes a piece of data, if somebody changes an invoice amount, or if it finds a new piece of data, it's going to put it in the right place. It's going to get it to the right person. So you can see here now that it has a PO number. It means line items to match. And so we'll just do a PO lookup. Off it shoots onto the PO system. I'll go ahead and match all the line items. And now I have those line items straight in my invoice. And I can finish this process. So I'll go ahead and click close.
So Pete, Nicole was asking about talking to the ERP. Does Prodagio talk in real time? So that data lookup you were doing, say, on PO, what if a PO was just changed and updated in 2 hours ago?
Yeah, absolutely. It connects in real time and can also do batch. And so there's a lot of flexibility because we also run into clients that have either older systems, AS400 systems. It's very easy to make those connections no matter what the ERP system is. So it's not just the big SAP as we talked about in this example, but smaller mid-market systems or even legacy systems can either be real-time or batch connection. So there we showed how we're simplifying the process using the benefits and interaction with the ERP to quickly go through and validate an invoice. The next thing I want to show is about visibility. And it really starts with the core screen here is I want to make everybody involved in understanding the value of this invoice. And if I'm pointing out here this life cycle, let me zoom into this life cycle. Here I'm using an analytics technology to help everybody understand exactly where this invoice is with this graphical spark chart of where the life cycle is in this invoice in terms of the discount. You can see here I missed the discount period by a day or so. With this, now I know and I can just visually quickly check what's going on with all my discounts. I have a better chance that even at the processing standpoint, I'm going to prioritize those higher. And so that small little change done across the whole shared services team or your whole AP staff can really begin to pay dividends in the overall improvement of discount capture. And so we're also using analytics to provide the processing team. I've logged in as a supervisor. Now I know what my team is doing and where my invoices are in the overall process and what's still pending approval. I can check the status of those. All this information accessible, easy for me then to really make business decisions and maybe even change the workload and dynamically move over to somebody else so we can get all those invoices cleared out. But the more important thing, when you really start considering about big data and you think about your executives, the controller, the vice president of finance, and the CFO, what do they want to see? They really want to see the aggregate, the whole system. And so analytics gives us that capability. And with the analytics, you don't really have to be a data expert. You know, it's not like Crystal Reports where I've got to get my data expert to go run the reports. All this has been set up, best practices, pre-configured. So I can just go in and make minor modifications or minor tweaks, ask questions in a new way, and see new ways of looking at the data. But I constantly am keeping track. So let's just look at this cash discounts report. And you can see here this is called a heat chart. So this is one of the standard graphic reports that comes in. And I have this Blue Cross Blue Shield of Florida I can immediately go in and take action on that. I can get down to an individual line item by just clicking on that, and the invoice will come up, and I can then action that invoice specifically. And so each one of these visualizations is set around a different business objective. Exceptions. I want to know who's causing me the most exceptions, which suppliers are challenging me in terms of giving me tough data to deal with, and what are the most common exceptions I'm dealing with. Then I can go in, redesign my process. Maybe I can go talk to that vendor that's causing me 1,500 errors last year and come up with different ways to deal with their data. Maybe I can switch them to EDI and remove all their data errors. So these standard reports about exceptions, cash discounts, productivity, how's my team doing this year? We'll pull up the productivity chart and we can see actively how many invoices the team has processed. And we can see that we're on a downward trend, and so that gives me an indicator to go take action. And so there's productivity, invoice status, and also you get new uses of data. So a great example of new uses of data is using line item detail to begin to understand what my spend is. And so as I'm capturing this, and we run quite often into where the order system isn't providing the data that purchasing needs. So now I can start using the line item detail to provide spend data. Here it is listed by region, and I can see each step by region. And everything I can interact and make modifications to this visualization. It'll change on the fly, so I can see again new views of that data. And then the last thing I'm not going to go into, but I just want to talk about this from a theme. You should demand of your SaaS applications that everything should be in the power of a business administrator to make these changes. And so the screens and what the screens say and how the rules work and who it's routed to should all be controllable by somebody that has a business context. And this really is the great promise of business applications in the cloud. Because not only can I get them up fast, but I can leverage the experience of others by using these best practices that are inherently built into the system. So with that, we quickly went through how to remove the barriers of paper and showed you how OCR was very, very easy to go through that verification process. We processed quick invoice to see that the simplification and using data throughout and providing that visibility can really allow you to see new things and take new actions. And the whole system built on best practices of those that have come before you, so you can leverage those as you step forward. So Henry, that really wraps up my quick demo there.
That's excellent. We had a question from Anita. She wanted to understand how the system Prodagio handles invoices issued in different languages, and a little more subtlety beyond that. What about using that for analytics if we have a different kind of language?
Yeah, well, that's a very good question. It's a complex one, obviously, when you run a global operation. First of all, is that capture technology supports various languages. So DataCap supports, multiple OCR extraction in different languages. And that's the first step, I would say, of dealing. Obviously, the application support, international languages. And after, it's a user experience on how you read that data. So analytics works in the same way in looking at extracting that data and, presenting the supplier information or the invoice amount or the parts, in the way that they've been extracted.
Excellent. Thank you.
Anything to add to that?
I think that does answer. We know that the intelligent document capture technology can read invoices in multiple languages, many of them, and it depends on what Pete was calling that dynamic workflow configuration of how you act upon the data that you find and designing that in a way that's meaningful for you. So I was using the example of oxygen. Well, maybe you also search for the word oxygen in multiple languages if you were looking for driving your workflows based on some data elements. So we are at time here for your questions. as we wrap up in our last 5 minutes, and we do have some questions. But before we get there, I wanted to bring to you the best practices that summarize some of the key themes. Many of you already know that centralization is generally accepted as the best practice in accounts payable today, supported by front-end imaging with automated workflow, a business logic system that can manage the documents dynamically, which you can configure and change on your own. In other words, if I see some data element that I want to change 3 months after we've implemented the solution, a best-in-practice solution today should allow you, the business user, to modify how the system works based on how you define your business logic, not how the developer defined it 6 months ago and left, and you no longer have them at your resource. You are in control of today's system. And lastly, here on supplier adoption. So I want to open it up. Here are some key things that can be takeaways for you. But we're going to open it up to your questions to understand things that you want to spend more time talking about in the rest of our time together today. So my first question is aimed at Fabrice. Prodagio sounds like a very powerful system. How long does it take to implement this?
Well, that's a very good question. Today is with the work we've done in pre-configuring, best practice and standardizing the ERP connection, whether it's SAP, Infor, or Microsoft Dynamics. We're very excited because it means that customers can get implemented in days, less than 30 days. That's our commitment to our customers. And the thing which is pretty interesting is that you can really start to impact the organization quickly. And because Pete mentioned that through the demo, is because it's configurable at the business user level, you can start to do process improvement. And that's very important, walk, and then you can start to run as a first step.
Wonderful. I see more questions coming in. Thank you all for participating so actively. Charlie wanted to know about how soon he might achieve a return on investment on something like this. It sounds like maybe Charlie has that senior management buy-in problem.
Yeah, I said this is Pete. Typically, it can be as soon as 3 months. It really depends on how quickly you get that return. Depends on how manual you start with. So if you're completely manual and touching everything with paper, you're going to see a very, very quick payback. But typically, we see between 3 and 6 months to see that full payback with everything that's been invested in.
Fantastic. Boy, and we know that's improved dramatically over the past several years. Thomas has been asking about managing mobile approvals. I want to use my approver's smartphones to approve the invoice. Can it be done?
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. Mobile is a critical component to the business and workflow and work processing going forward. And we've had mobile approval for a couple of years now and continue to invest and see this as a very, very important thing, both from mobile phone form factors and also tablet form factors. So it's definitely any SaaS application that you guys take a look at, definitely you should make this a requirement as you go forward.
We agree. Obviously, today, I think in 2014, we expect that half of websites will be viewed using mobile devices and tablets. So that's a critical decision piece. But it shouldn't be a barrier. It should be an opportunity for you. We have a question from Jonathan. Is it always a best practice to use a purchase order? And I'm going to take a crack at that, and I know Fabrice and Pete might want to weigh in as well. Purchase orders are something that originally were designed, of course, for manufacturing organizations and made their way into most modern ERP systems today. They work really well when we're dealing with a discrete purchase. That means one where there's inventory or materials or parts, and there's units of measure. I'm buying gallons or units, numbers, cartons, etc. POs sometimes don't work great when we have services because the services don't fit into those categories that may be part of our ERP system. And so we're seeing more organizations, the innovators, creating new classes of purchase, perhaps called purchase request, which is something we like to call it. It may not be a PO in your ERP system, but we do want to do something that is so powerful, is match against something. It's great when an invoice comes in, it can be matched against something. The core question is, do you always want to match it against a PO as the only matching element? And we suggest that no, maybe it's not the best practice, and you can use another kind of purchase request. Maybe it's a catalog order, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a PO the way we think of it, driven by our ERP system. Wow. I think
Henry, I saw a question out there from Jeff that about is there a cost to the supplier community of using a SaaS approach? I love this question because it really fits in our perspective of dealing with suppliers. You know, one of the things that we've always believed in, it's one of our design parameters as we go in, is that we think the power should be in the company's hands, and they should be having that direct relationship with the supplier. And so in terms of bringing in scanned invoices or email, it's a great common denominator, free for everybody, easy for your long tail suppliers. And when I say long tail, I mean your smaller suppliers that you get fewer invoices from. But when you start in embracing the portfolio approach, that if you have a portal, or you can leverage our portal too, that's your tool to allow your suppliers another way to put invoices in. And so there's no incremental charge to the suppliers because we want everything to be as fast and as electronic as possible. And so with the Prodagio solution, there's no incremental cost, and we really try to design it in a way to make that transfer of information to be as easy and as fluid as possible.
And Pete, I see another question also about training. I know we're running up on time, so I'm going to take this one quickly. We offer, obviously, very powerful way to train our customers. Obviously, it can go from train to trainer, on-site training. We've got tons of online resources available to our customers, whether through knowledge base, recorded video. The system, I would tell you, is very intuitive. So surprisingly, does not require extensive training. But we've got a battery of options here adapted to how customers use the training.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Fabrice. And thank you, Pete, for being our guest faculty on today's session of Breaking Through the Barriers to AP Automation. We hope you've taken a lot out of this session today. This session was recorded and is available, will be made available for rebroadcast to any organizational members that you have. Stay tuned for that. You also have access to some resources, including the electronic invoice report at Paystream Advisors, or another white paper that we've just completed for Prodagio that will be available on their website soon. Thank you so much. From Charlotte, North Carolina, this is Henry Iams from Paystream Advisors signing off. Thank you, Pete and Fabrice, from joining us from Prodagio Software. Goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. Also.